Hello, my name is. All right. How do you greet the people? I'm trying to think of the intro. Dude, this is the hard part. I think one thing that everybody underestimates about a podcast is a good intro line. So I'm going to give it my best shot. All right, folks. Welcome to another episode of Mere Coffee Roaster warm-up sessions. And we are stoked to be here. And I hope you are as well. This is going to be a fun podcast. We're chatting, planning. And I think that this episode is going to be a treat for us to talk about. But I also think for people that are listening, this is going to be fun. So that's my intro.
Powerful. Friends, episode 2 of the year of 2023. Hopefully everybody's year is off to a tasty start.
That's right.
I know I'm not going to beat a dead horse. Anyways, let's get into this.
Yep, we've talked about that coffee for a while. Yeah.
Anyways, yes. Hopefully everybody's been enjoying the new year. Hopefully everybody's out there changing their lives. Did you set some New Year's resolutions or no?
No.
You over it?
No, I'm over it. I didn't even set any goals.
Any aspirations?
Aspirations.
For the new year? Nothing?
I listened to a Gary Vee podcast about it, and I was about it. I'm like, nice. That's some good.
Dang.
It was about that Eatables or whatever guy. Feastables. Oh, man, what was
Beast?
it? No. Oh, that's I'm mistaking way too many.
Yeah.
I've listened to way too many podcasts, but I feel like a lot of folks are talking about either the resolutions or goals, or I think those things are great. But this year, I didn't set anything practical yet. I haven't went back to the gym either, so I'm actually planning on canceling my gym subscription this month.
That's a resolution.
It is, yeah. I might move to another gym.
This year, I want to cancel all my gym's memberships.
Exactly.
That's the resolution.
I mean, on a serious note, I want to walk less this year. Because last year I walked way too many steps.
Is that even a thing? What's the problem with that?
Yeah, it just my body is not holding up.
Oh.
My knees hurt, my back hurts. I mean, I carry my backpack with my laptop, my R6, my 7200, my 35, and my 50.
Too much.
Almost every day. I would say every day. Like there's a day or two when I just I'm in so much, my back hurts so much that I'm just taking my tote with my laptop.
That's great. You should always do that.
No, I can't.
That's
I need the gear. You never know when you need to shoot some content.
Snap a banger.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, this tastes better than my filter earlier. Or maybe not. I don't know.
No, this is a pleasant extraction. This coffee isn't super wild, but it's a pleasant extraction.
No, I think my filter tastes better. I don't know. This is just so much more like poppy. Got so much more zing to it.
I think it's also stronger.
Was my filter 1-17?
1-16.
Yeah.
And this is a 1-15 on the batch brew.
That might be it.
And I think there's also one thing other than, the ratio, which I think still has probably one of my favorite batch brew results.
Extractions, yeah.
Yeah, it's the Breville is great, honestly. It's something I would recommend. But yeah, I mean, there's a reason why somebody would brew a filter over a drip. There's very real reasons. And this reminds me of that, especially since you just brewed it literally like an hour ago.
Maybe I just really over extracted it, actually, now that I think of it.
When?
On my filter.
No. I think your filter was pretty dialed.
Yeah, it cooled really nice. And this is still this is not a hot temperature, but it's like mid-temp. And it's tasting nice, big.
It's just the clarity. I don't think the clarity's there.
Oh, you think my brew had more clarity?
Your brew had more clarity.
Okay.
I think this just tastes like it's got nice sweetness. It's really nice on the sweetness. I I see this every podcast, but lots of like solid stone fruit sweetness. Like it's just this big stone fruit, and that's it. And there's not much I wouldn't say there's much complexity on this.
Fair.
So I don't know.
It just has nice, like a honey flavor. Is what I'm picking up.
It's got big sweetness, which is great.
Yeah.
And this is an Ethiopia honey process, not from us. It's from another roasting company that we both really enjoy drinking. But yeah, I think a recent blog post by Scott kind of opened my eyes recently about the three. It's what I read to you when we're roasting.
Yeah, sorry.
It's like the three different kinds of roasters where he has like Nordic, he has like maximum juiciness and then sweetness, like maximum sweetness. And to me, that was really like great to hear, because it's not that one's better than the other necessarily. Even though you may have preferences that, hey, I don't like this roast of it because X, Y, and Z.
Right.
It's either too roasty for somebody, or it's too, underdeveloped. Hey, like green, like, and even those, to a certain extent can be preferential to a certain extent.
Yeah.
But what I enjoyed what I'm saying about the post is that there's different ranges, and all of them can be enjoyed depending on your preference. But they're very different from one another.
Yeah.
And that's like a roasting style thing, which makes this really interesting.
Yeah.
And those roasts, I'd probably say, are within maybe, I don't know, I'm just throwing this out there, maybe 10 degrees. Maybe.
Fair. Yeah.
Depending
from
on
everything that we've experienced from our data, like 10 degrees is a pretty big range. So.
Yeah. It's a big range. But I guess what I'm saying is for viewers, like,
right.
This is, in reality, it's actually slim range. Yeah. But there's just such a rich range of flavor that you can achieve depending on your preferred roast style. Right. So.
Yeah. Man, I don't want to open up another can of worms. One, that blog post was great. Taylor and I talked about it. And especially with Taylor roasting at Origin and the perspective of how people consume coffee in the West and how people consume coffee in the East is very different. So there's that preferential difference. But we had a great conversation around where he would land in Indo and where like we would land here in the United States. But the other thing that came to my mind is the idea of roast style, which maybe we need to cover this. I don't know. I don't like that terminology. I don't like the idea of roast style. It's so big and broad. I don't know. Can you even define what that even means? I remember when we did an interview for Roast Magazine, like within the first year of running, and they asked me, like, I read back that article and I'm like, what was I even saying? I'm like, I obviously had no idea how to define that. And I probably still have a hard time with that. But I think roast style is more preference of how you like your coffee style. You know what I mean?
Sure.
You see what I mean?
I think they're very interconnected, interrelated, because you're obviously going to be adjusting your roast according to what you're tasting.
Right. That's
you're
what
not
I mean.
like blindly just adjusting your roast and hoping it tastes good when it comes out of your roaster. Yeah. And you're adjusting according to roast. But I think, and that's what I mean by preferential. Like you could if you like really, really light Nordic roasts, then you're probably not going to like something on the other side of the spectrum that's a little more heavy on the sweetness. And if you like something heavy on the sweetness, drinking like a Nordic roast will just be like, dude, this just tastes like hay. Yeah. And so, it's very much so a flavor preference. But it's hard because it's not that, I want to say one is worse than the other. Like, I can't say that objectively for the world. Right. But for myself, I can tell you what's worse. Yeah. Because that's for me.
Yeah, what you like and don't like. Yeah. And then obviously roast style can also, in my mind, was the approach on how you roast a coffee, That's what I thought as well back in the day, and kind of still do, because like.
But why is that different? Why would that be different?
You can have a light roast with a Scott's approach.
Mm-hmm.
You can have a light roast with Rob's approach.
Yeah.
With Ann Cooper's, with Mark Michelson's approach. You can have a light roast with all of those approaches, but they would have similarities in how they would start and finish a roast, but the in-between would have also differences, right? Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, of course. I think, but I don't.
So technically they have a different roasting style,
Yeah.
but their finished product can have a similar roast style. Do you see where I'm mixing the two?
But I think this is an interesting conversation. That I think roast style refers to the style that you roast from A to Z. I think from the moment you get green into a roaster, even how you dose out your roasts, even how you warm up your machine, I think that all has to do with roast style. Yeah. To the moment that it gets, cupped ejected right out of your cooling bin, to that moment when it's cooling and it's ready to hit the cupping table, I think everything you do in there is your roast style.
Yeah, which makes this so broad. So, therefore, I guess it makes it broad but defined. I get it. Therefore, my answer for a Roast Magazine interview wasn't too bad or kind of bad, because I said, we want to reflect the producer or something along those lines to the best of our ability. Yeah. Meaning we want to roast the coffee to its ultimate flavor, but then the ultimate flavor is defined by our palates. Right, not the producer's palate, right? Yeah. So I was kind of wrong, but kind of very, just objectively very broad
and
in that answer.
Yeah, for sure. It's kind of hard to say. It's kind of hard to say, like, once. And I think this is the first time I actually worded it this way. Yeah. That I can't speak objectively, give a grade on something, but if you ask me subjectively, I can tell you what's worse and what's better. But I wouldn't be able to say, hey, I'm speaking on behalf of all specialty coffee drinkers.
Right, exactly.
I can't say that. And because I think, as much as I don't like to say, but a lot of flavor is subjective. Yeah. Just because somebody likes something doesn't mean that everybody does. And I think that's something to say for, when we, we've had a few people reach out to this podcast, to us, and be like, hey, can I send you some coffee for you to try, for you to taste, and give me some feedback? And we've had that episode already on the podcast about how important it is to have feedback. Yeah. So that's what people are referring to. And we're always more than happy to do that. But I think what I really want to be careful for is saying, I think really good questions like, hey, what are you trying to achieve with this roast? What are you trying to taste out of it? What are you trying to get to? That's good. And I think that's important, because I need to remove as much as my subjectiveness out of this if you're trying to achieve something specific. Like, if you're trying to go for like a full city roast, it wouldn't make sense for me to say, well, it's not a light roast, which means it's bad. Yeah. But you're trying to achieve a full city roast. It would make sense if I said, hey, this is how you can make your full city roast better. Right. That already changes the kind of the direction of the conversation, and allows you to actually achieve what you're looking for out of the roast, without. Yeah. Yeah. That's really good. Yeah. So, still cringing about that interview. Why? It was foolish. Some of my answers, especially that one. I'm like, good intent, good heart behind it. How do you roast to? How would you describe our roasting style now? Ooh, man, we're taking a left turn now. We're just gonna ship it. This isn't what we were gonna talk about, we're already. Man, I think it's just so hard to define.
exactly what we like our coffees to taste like. I think we definitely referencing back to Scott's blog. I think we're definitely aiming towards like a bigger acidity kind of coffee, right? What were his three? Sweetness, acidity, and
It was like Nordic, which is more heavy on clarity and acidity.
yeah.
There's maximum juiciness, whatever that means, but which means like you're trying to find the balance of nice acidity, but also heavy on sweetness for those to work together. That's maximum juiciness, and then on the end is prioritizing big sweetness, which is sometimes you'd sacrifice clarity and acidity to get a cup that's more heavy on the sweetness. So those are kind of the three.
Yeah, and that's where I would say like we're definitely on the balance side. That's where we're aiming for every single time we're cupping and every single time we're even enjoying coffee in a cafe. That's what we're looking for. Again, like, my preferences when it comes to drinking like the bourbon varietal. Like I'm looking for a lot of acidity, but the idea of how I describe acidity is also juicy. So that would lean towards that middle ground, right? I'm not looking for acidity that's like classic we laugh at, like El Limonar, like biting into a lemon. Like I'm not looking for a lemon
for
bomb.
the record, it's a great coffee.
It's a great coffee, but yeah, that
it's
was
just how people decided to roast it and brew it.
Right, 100%. Yeah, and that's not what I'm like looking for. I'm looking for more of like a apple, like pear or malic acidity, like stuff like that. And that's what I find in our roasts to be the balance, where we have that sweetness, but it's not necessarily roasty. And of course, we try to avoid as much as we can the ultra light vegetal kind of flavors or herbaceous flavors in a cup. But I'm saying all this and I'm like, wait, so who is like, man, I want a vegetal coffee?
Right.
You see what I mean? It's almost.
I mean, there are people who, but
they wouldn't describe that as vegetal.
They wouldn't describe. Yeah, that's the thing. They wouldn't, and that's where I think that personal preference of flavor and where you are on that spectrum matters, because what I would call, whether it's vegetal or hay-like or whatever, somebody might just say, "Ooh, that's bright and clarity and has nice zingy acidity," or whatever it is. And hey, so be it. Yeah. I would say like, as much as I think my flavor preference is the best in the world, as much as I would like to think so, at the same time, I would not want every roasting company to roast according to my preference. Right. That would just make the insane amount of variety in the spectrum that coffee can land on an aromatic level, but also on a taste level. It would literally limit that into a very small window, right? Which would just be no fun. But I think that definitely sits on your preferential, and we've had this conversation about also you and I about like will people say they like fermented coffees? Yes. Or will they just say that they're picking up something different and they'll call it something else? When to us, that's what we would call it out at, So yeah, I think we also land on, we try to always balance it. Not saying that we 100% of the roasts we nail it, but that's always the goal. Is like even in this cupping, we just had a cupping literally like 2 hours ago, and like especially this coffee right here on this corner of the table, it was like, okay, cool. There's a lot of it's more heavier on the sweet side, which isn't bad, but we also have tasted that coffee when it was slightly lighter and it balanced the acidity a little bit better with the sweetness. And I feel like that's where we sit, and that's kind of the idea behind every roast. What do you think? Are we also roasting but are we also sourcing coffee?
That's where I was
with
gonna
that
go.
perspective.
Right. Because depending on what coffee we source is going to basically affect what is the final roasted result in the cup. So I think we're also sourcing with those things in mind when we're choosing a coffee and we're cupping sample roasts. We're looking at the fact, like, does the coffee have potential? Or I know we've also talked about what does potential mean in, cupping samples, but we're looking for balance in the sample already. So we're probably going to try to stay away from coffees that taste like specifically just very basic chocolate that need a lot of caramelization that we're just like creating. We still, even our quote unquote basic coffees still have that balance of acidity that adds complexity to it. But they kind of lean maybe a little more on the sweeter side, quote unquote. You know what I mean?
For 100%.
Versus another coffee that we choose that may have like a lot of acidity, but then when we roast it, we kind of try to sacrifice some of that acidity to also lean it towards the middle. So it's not like if you make a scale of like 1 to 10, like all of our coffees are in like a 5. And that starts from the sourcing and how we choose our coffees, because we want some of the coffees to bring a little bit of a diversity to our menu. So we have to choose that way with that in mind.
For sure. I think sourcing is hard.
Really hard.
It's, for, all the roasters listening to this podcast, I know there's a handful of you. That is probably the hardest and one of the most important things. Not to say that roasting is not important or is easy, totally. But it's that is actually something you have to practice and learn how to get better at, or else you might be always wondering why your coffee just doesn't quite match up to other coffees. And it could be simply because they just source better coffee than you. So there's a certain extent where you can't, where sourcing has to go hand in hand with your roasting style.
Right.
And we've also touched up on this on the podcast, but if you're a roaster, it's kind of like, it's a very similar, if you're brewing coffee at home and you want coffees that are syrupy, that are sweet, that are rich, that are big, that are going to pull nicely on espresso, that are going to cut through milk very nice, all this stuff, you're going to look for coffees that have flavor notes on bags with that kind of, that are of that sort.
Right. Yep.
If you're looking for zingy, zippy, wild, complex, nuanced, light roast filter coffees, then you're going to look for a specific kind of reference, because that's what you want to get through your brewing process, or maybe your preferred brewing method.
Yeah.
The same thing must happen when you're roasting. Your roast style, I think, in my opinion, should go hand in hand with your green sourcing.
Yep.
You should be thinking like, man, these are the coffees that we lean towards. This is what we usually like to roast. How do we pick up coffees on the green end that can help support that and make that job a little easier, or that you can maximize the flavor experience with that kind of coffee?
Yep. That makes sense. And I think this, don't want to put you on the spot, but the question that comes to my mind is, how a lot of the times when people are describing roasting style, they say, oh, we want to preserve the flavor of the terroir.
Yeah.
Like, what does that even mean? And when it comes to defining your personal roasting style for your company or yourself or the brand, in collaboration with the objective, like this coffee was grown in this region, at this farm, at this origin, and preserving that with the roasting style, or do those just go hand in hand, or does that not even matter? Like, what's the deal with
terroir with
that whole the whole statement of like, man, we want to roast to preserve the flavor of the terroir.
Sure. I think I don't see anything wrong with it, because I think, to a certain extent, I mean, what we like to say, and we still say, is we want to do this coffee justice. Like somebody
Yes.
labored a lot of hard work. Their farm has its own specific kind of flavor profile. This producer's processing practices
Yes.
has a specific flavor profile. How they do things, all this stuff that happens at origin is so precise and so unique to specific areas or regions or processing methods where I think it's very normal to say like I want to highlight that the most. Now, is that an objective concept?
Right.
Probably not. You know, somebody might say, "Oh, you're not as that acidity quite as much as I would."
Yep.
Which means you're not doing justice. But I also like as much as very dicey as that can get.
Yeah.
You know, saying that I also want to acknowledge the heart behind it.
Right.
And say,
That's,
I think it's very valid to say, man, I want to do this justice. I want to reflect that, hey, this is a tasty guat, or hey, this is a, an Ethiopia natural, or whatever it is. Like, and I hope, this can get controversial, but I hope you're not taking, a geisha and roasting it to Vienna roast.
That's what I was. That's what I was thinking.
Like, I really hope so,
Yeah.
and I hope
Yeah.
you're not roasting a geisha for it to taste like straight up just grass.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I know those are very extremes. What I might call grassy, somebody else might say, "Oh, that's zingy," and that's great.
Yeah,
but
totally.
but for sure, like those extremes, like I hope you're not doing that to a tasty geisha.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's where kind of my mind was at during that interview, is honoring the hard work of the producer by trying to roast it to the best of our ability and understanding of what the coffee could potentially taste like, which there's a lot of nuance in that whole interpretation and understanding of the actual green coffee and where it was grown. Man, I had another thought, and now I'm glad you said that, because that kind of solidifies part of my worry of like, did I do that interview justice? And I don't know why that interview even came to my mind on this podcast. It's kind of so random, but I thought about it. Man, I had another question. Maybe it'll come back.
Yeah. I think this is very very unplanned conversation, really, but I think it's very timely because I think next weekend will be the launch of our entire new menu, and friends, we're putting in a lot of work into this, and we really want to do justice to these beautiful coffees. And this is the thought process that we have. Literally, you got an inside scoop of what it sounds like at the cupping table with us in the room.
Right.
Like, this is the things where we're like, this may not fit exactly what we're trying to get with a roast. This one is spot on. This one is popping. This one's excellent. This one could use a little tweakage, and to say the least, next week will be exciting. I'm excited for all the beautiful coffees that we're releasing, and there's some exceptional ones out there.
And in general, there's some exciting stuff for us coming up this year. As a whole, we're going to be most likely going to Origin twice. We're planning on being at SCA this year, planning on it. That's been something that you and I have never been to together.
That's so weird. That's so weird,
our
man.
first SCA plan was 2020, and Mir was started and opened in 2020. So it's like finally we're getting to these plans, and excited to go to a convention, but also explore other things in coffee that were limited due to the last few complicated years.
Right. Yeah.
So it's an exciting year in general, kicking it off with that drop. And then, there's so much to talk about. So I know we're probably going to dedicate a few podcasts to all of the exciting announcements, but I'm stoked.
I'm beyond excited for this year. I think this year, with what we have planned, if all goes well, honestly, I don't know, the world might end tomorrow.
Yeah.
With all the craziness, but truly, it's something that everything, all these things, we've been like, this has been in the works for years. Like, I'm not even over exaggerating.
Yeah.
This is stuff we've talked about for a while, whether that's going to Origin, whether it's launching this new experience for Mir. Like, this is exciting. And so, to say the least, I'm very excited. This year will be really, really fun. Lots of good stuff to come.
Yeah. Super stoked. Well, I guess am I doing the wrap up as well?
Let's do
the
it.
opening.
Let's do
All
it.
right, folks. Well, folks, again, thank you for listening to another episode of Mirror Coffee Roaster Warm Up Sessions. And remember, reflect what's good.